AI is reworking the 3 lines of defense. It's rewriting job roles and reshaping how audit and risk teams operate.
We're talking about what happens when machine meets materiality and why CFOs, GCs, and audit chairs are all paying attention.
Plus, we've got key takeaways on why this is an opportunity for audit and risk professionals to flip the script and become the heroes of innovation.
Welcome to the pre-read. Just like the slides you get before a big meeting, the pre-read prepares you, CFOs, and other executives for the next big thing. It's the global podcast where finance, sustainability, audit, and risk teams come together in the C-suite.
If you're making decisions at scale or need to understand the leaders who are, you're in the right place. This is the pre-read, brought to you by Workiva.
I'm Steve Soter, accounting enthusiast and Diet Coke aficionado.
And I'm Alyssa Zucker, sustainability nerd and equal opportunist caffeine addict.
Today, we're talking about AI and governance with 2 people who are on the front lines of this conversation. Later in the episode, you'll hear from Shane Negangard, the head of internal audit for Workiva. But first up is our friend Matt Kelly of Radical Compliance.
Some key takeaways from that conversation with Matt. The biggest concern for audit and compliance professionals isn't how they can use AI to improve their jobs, but rather how other departments are using AI without their knowledge. Also, many companies' existing policies are not yet fit for purpose in the age of AI. The regulatory infrastructure, risk tolerance, and knowledge of new risks have not kept pace with the rapid adoption of AI by employees.
My 2 takeaways: the widespread use of AI to complete compliance training, as demonstrated by a compliance training vendor, reveals a deeper issue. The programs themselves are just unengaging, or they're not respected by employees, which is a problem. And second, AI is exposing cracks in the traditional 3 lines of defense model. An AI system can perform continuous monitoring of all transactions, which blurs the line between preventive controls, detective controls, and the roles of the 2nd and 3rd lines of defense.
Matt shares insights on all of this. So without further ado, let's go to Matt Kelly.
We've got Matt Kelly here of Radical Compliance. For those of you who are not aware, Radical Compliance is a weekly newsletter that I receive and love because it's hilarious and well-written. We have Matt Kelly here with us. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Always a pleasure to be here.
All right, well, Matt, you're here to talk to us today about AI and governance. Why are we here to talk about it? What's keeping you up about this? What are some concerns that you see around AI governance?
That we don't have enough of it. That really is the issue here. I think that for audit and compliance people, the question isn't necessarily how could you use AI to make your job better, which you could, and people are. The real concern for them is how is everybody else in your enterprise using AI, but not necessarily telling you. And that could happen in any number of ways. These operating units out there in the 1st or 2nd lines of defense at your company, they might decide that they're going to use an AI product and not tell you. You might already have an technology vendor you use who suddenly announces we now have AI integrated in, and the employees of your company say, that's awesome. We're going to do this, this, and this. There are some really interesting studies from KPMG showing that they polled, I think it was 47,000 people worldwide in 48 different countries, very expansive, that found nearly half of them admitted that they use AI in ways that directly contravene what their company's policies are, primarily by taking confidential data and dumping it into some open platform like ChatGPT or Gemini or something else to do what they do, or they're not checking to make sure that the results the AI give you is valid, and various other things that there's any number of risks that could go wrong there. What are the guardrails the company is putting in place to make sure that AI usage is not going to go haywire? And that is a big struggle, but it is a big and ongoing issue that, how are you going to get ahead of the AI adoption that everybody wants to do?
I'm actually shocked by 2 things that you said. One, that those survey respondents admitted to that in the survey, which I imagine was anonymous, given that admission. But 2, that they actually know what their policies are, that they know that they're contravening.
Yes. I actually have the exact same thought. I probably shouldn't admit this on recording, but I think I know the policies. I certainly know what the red lines are. But you could get down to some questionable use cases. And to me, if they're like overtly like out there admitting it, then to me, that's not only like, well, I might be doing something wrong. Oh, you're probably clearly doing something wrong if you absolutely know for sure.
Well, first, one weird thing about the survey is, yes, half admitted on a survey I'm violating company policy, but 2/3 said I've seen my coworkers do it. So some certain percent between half and 2/3 also lied about it on the survey that they're not doing it because somebody else saw them doing it. But I think one big challenge is, are you violating policy or not? Do you know what the policy is? We should step back and have a gut check. Do we know that the policies you have are in fact fit for purpose in an AI world? And a lot of times the answer is going to be, no, we don't know. Sure, I think most people would know if you take highly personal customer data or undisclosed financial data and you put it in ChatGPT, that's bad. But what if they are just using ChatGPT to come up with a board presentation and they're not necessarily double checking all of the work, but they didn't use any confidential data? Is that violating policy? I don't know. Do you have a policy about that? Maybe you don't. Is that a bad idea? I mean, I kind of think so, but I'm not entirely sure. So for a lot of these questions, the regulatory infrastructure isn't caught up with where AI should be. Your risk appetite and tolerances, or even just your knowledge of the risks, probably is behind the curve. And you haven't even translated that into what a policy should be, but the employees are using it. So how are we trying to think about that? Who's the we? Who's involved? Should audit be there? Yes. Should compliance be there? Yes. Are they there in that room? Actually, other surveys I've seen show that like roughly 2/3 of compliance officers are, and that's good news. But they still have deep fears that the policies they're developing are not keeping pace with the endless ways that employees are figuring out interesting, I'll call them use cases, even if the use cases might be pretty daft and harebrained.
Well, let's talk about some daft and harebrained use cases that are clearly and unquestionably bad. You've written recently about using AI to complete compliance training on behalf of an employee. I recently did some compliance training this last week. I kind of wish I would have thought about AI. No, I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. But can you comment on that? And not so much about just like that instance by itself, which is clearly bad. That brings up, I think, a broader question about that training, the effectiveness, and even the cultural implications of employees not even thinking it's important in the first place.
It is, yeah. So this came to my attention from a compliance training vendor when ChatGPT released its latest model. You can then, any user can switch on agent mode, and then you can ask the agent to do something. So they said, well, let's see what would happen if we told it to go take our compliance training. And so the AI did, and they recorded it, and you could see a very, I'll guess, interesting video of the AI is whizzing through the training. It pops up little dialogue boxes to show the users what it's doing. There's one moment where it gave an answer, thought about it, and then you can see the dialogue box. Actually, no, I've changed my mind. I'm going to flip the answer. But it whizzed through everything, all on its own. Now, some people will say, is cheating on your training really new? And no, it's not. Nobody should cheat on training, but everybody, it's been going on for years. I don't know that this is cheating per se. It's more like you've subcontracted your training out to another person who actually happens to be software code instead of a person.
How resourceful.
Yes.
Sounds industrious. I like it.
But, and we might make fun of, say, compliance or security training, but if you are involved in some sort of critical infrastructure where you decide to let ChatGPT or any AI, I don't want to pick just on ChatGPT, but if you let AI take your safety training or something like that, if you're designing cars or airplanes or something like where there could be serious lives lost, that's not fun. That's not nothing to joke about, but it could be done. So I went and I asked some compliance officers, what do you think about it? And they all said, well, I guess it's disturbing, but if my employees are doing this, that tells me more like my training program really sucks, because is it that bad or that pointless or that under-respected? That's fair. That is a good point. I don't know how many people will actually decide to do this. It's not like compliance training is terribly onerous, but it gets to, should your training be more engaging so they will want to do it? That's it gets to issues about what is the actual training, what's the format of it, how engaging is it, how do you engage them, what kind of tests, what about the overall culture of the organization, where don't we all want to be the best and the most highly disciplined that we are? A lot of questions like that, AI is calling this out, so I guess it's good, but it does raise some pretty serious questions about how do you keep employees engaged in what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It actually brings to mind the pre-flight safety video of an airplane.
Yes.
They used to have the attendants do it, and then, the screens came in, and there's no links to which they won't go to make that entertaining, so people will watch the darn thing. And anyways, you're describing this, I'm like, we're going to have this like dog and pony compliance show, training now just to get people to engage.
But that kind of sounds great. I mean, not to point fingers here, but I'm thinking about Steve's experience of going through the training, and then I'm thinking of my own mindset as I did it. And, for me, I do the trainings, and part of it is, obviously I don't want to mess up or make a mistake, but I also I don't like to ask questions when I'm already supposed to know the answer. And I'm thinking about this also for our security training, all the trainings. And but I will say maybe a silver lining here is like make the content more engaging and actually useful for folks, where they feel like, okay, maybe I don't really want to do this, but I know I really have to, because there's actually information in here that I know I need. And that's important for me to operate the way I want to operate.
That's all absolutely right. For audiences listening to the podcast, there's probably a short-term and a long-term issue to juggle here. The short-term, you might want to check to make sure, is this actually happening in my organization? What would I look for? Well, if suddenly your training completion rates go from random numbers to everybody's doing it 98.6% of the time and everybody's taking it in exactly 1 minute and 36 seconds, that probably means everybody's using AI, and that's not good. There are certain tricks you could look for to see if this bad habit is taking root. But to the longer term question, how are you going to make your training more engaging? How could you make it more customized, which AI could do, because it could follow along and see what people are good at or not good at. But that is an issue that you, the HR team, the AI development team, the compliance team, everybody would have to get together and figure out, how do we not have AI be the thing that employees are using against us, but that we are using to make sure training is helping the employee.
Make the tech work for you.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so you mentioned before this idea of the triple line of defense and how AI might be threatening that, or frankly, changing the way that internal audit operates. Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Sure. So, the third line of defense, the internal auditors, whom we all love and care for deeply, it is their job to test internal controls and see if the controls are working or not. Say you, the internal auditor, are looking at 1,000 transactions, you've randomly selected a sample, and you find that 11 are not according to parameters. So you've got a failure rate of 1.1%. Is that good or is that not? We could debate that. But along comes the AI system, and it hoovers up every single transaction, and it finds that there are 31 exceptions. So did it test the control? Because it didn't really test anything. It was monitoring every single control and then found exceptions. So that's not a test like the third line would do. It is more like managing the control and testing it continuously, which is kind of sort of what the second line does, but it's a little bit of the third line thrown in. Long-winded way of saying, I don't know what line is doing what there, but clearly you'd want that to be able to study all transactions and identify all problematic transactions immediately, but we don't know what that is. And is that a second line? Is it third line? Did they collapse them together? Is it both? Is it kind of half and half? I would say yes to all three, but what are we supposed to do with that knowledge? And there are a lot of auditors out there, of voices in the audit community, who are starting to wonder, is AI going to transform what the three lines of defense are if AI could have one AI system could do a little bit of each line all at once? There are others who would say, no, that's not true. The third line would then shift to testing the AI system. And where is it learning? How is it learning? What data are you feeding it? And what are the user access controls for it? So people are going back and forth on this, but it calls out that the traditional idea of three lines of defense, AI is going to expose cracks in that we will need to address somehow.
And for those listening who might be thinking, hey, this just seems like some inside baseball conversation.
I was going to go with who is on first.
Well, only applicable to auditors. I think the reason why this is important is that 3 lines of defense as a model, to me, is actually showing this progression getting further and further away from where the prevention really needs to happen, like where the thing needs to be protected. And now what we're talking about is that AI is sort of disrupting that proximity in kind of weird ways. So if you're building out this control infrastructure, well, this is actually going to change how you would sort of design it and think about it, because now you're having these curveballs, right, being thrown at you that's kind of busting the model a little bit. I want to level set for the audience. This is actually a really important issue, not just for internal auditors.
I think so. And specifically, the reason this came up is somebody in the session I heard about it, they gave the example, what if you're using the sample and detection approach on your own, but your external auditor walks in and they've got AI, which at this point they all do, and they hoover up all the transactions. But you say, well, no, we're going to use, or, we're just going to stick with our sampling of 1,000 transactions. Like, really? And do you think your external auditor is going to be cool with that? You're going to wind up, I would say, being forced to, if not embrace AI fully, at least try and figure out how to use it in ways that will help. If they're observing all controls at all times and all transactions, is that a preventive control? Is it a detective control? Is it neither? Is it both? I don't have a good answer for it, but it is clearly not what we have done up until now, but it's also clearly better. And we're going to have to figure this out.
Well, Matt Kelly, Radical Compliance. You can get Radical Compliance like I do in your inbox every week for free. Go to radicalcompliance.com. I'm doing this of my own volition, by the way, not because Matt has asked for it, because it's a fabulous resource that I get weekly.
Thank you.
Matt Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Always happy to be here.
If you're listening to the show, you know that artificial intelligence is no longer just hype. It's already transforming workflows across finance, sustainability, audit, and risk. But here's the truth. AI isn't replacing people. The real opportunity is augmenting teams with smarter tools while unlocking the uniquely human strengths that drive strategy and trust. Join Workiva and guest speaker Seth Madison, CEO of FutureSight Labs, on Thursday, October 23rd at 2 p.m. for a webinar on how to thrive in the AI era. We'll cut through the myths and share practical ways to blend AI with human creativity, empathy, and decision-making for lasting impact. Register now at workiva.com/PR-AI human. That's WORKIVA.com/PR-AI human.
Next up is our conversation with Shane Negangard, Head of Internal Audit at Workiva. A couple of moments that stuck out to me. First, technology is absolutely outpacing governance. With the rapid pace of AI development, we're outpacing governance, internal controls, and frameworks that are needed to monitor it. There is no single source of truth yet for AI governance. And the Department of No is very risky. Risk in internal audit teams must avoid simply saying no to AI adoption, because doing so can be even more risky in the long run.
I really like Shane's 3 C's principle. He said that to be effective, audit and risk teams must communicate, collaborate, and confirm. This means working proactively with other departments to understand their needs and to provide insight from the beginning of a project. And he highlighted the opportunity in uncertainty. The current environment of regulatory and macroeconomic uncertainty presents an opportunity for audit and risk professionals to flip the script and move beyond their traditional stereotypes. We'll let you fill in the blanks on what those are, and how by using data and analytics, they can shift from focusing on just financial risk to more operational and strategic risks.
And with that, let's get to our conversation with Shane. Welcome, Shane Negangard, Head of Internal Audit for Workiva. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure to be here, Steve. Thank you.
All right, Shane. So you're here from the audit and risk space. When we think of AI governance, what's like keeping you up there at night? What are the concerns that keep you up?
It's numerous, but obviously the fast pace. Everywhere we look, everyone we talk to, especially at a conference like this, is talking about AI something or another. Governance has become, I think, the newest buzzword because we've realized that the technology is quickly outpacing the governance or the internal controls or the frameworks that we're trying to develop to monitor. What are the guardrails that we're trying to operate within? And so I think every organization is probably at a different place at that. And every technology or every application is talking about it, but I don't know that there's a single source of truth out there yet.
Yeah, just a moment on governance. I happen to love when it's governance, like their time to shine. I guess I'm a governance geek, but I think it's actually with AI a really tangible example because, I'm from the sustainability side. And so when you started thinking about governance of sustainability, it was more like, okay, let's think about, I don't know, who controls these decisions? Who's a vested stakeholder? Like, how do we actually govern this at our company? But AI is something that's so broadly accessible, and we're all living the development and evolution of it in such real time that we're all actually putting those pieces together, figuring out how to use it as individuals in our roles, figuring out from the company standpoint, what are those guardrails, what's acceptable. And so I just think AI almost gives like the broad public or any employee across any discipline a real opportunity to really get governance, to really understand what it is to have internal controls and guardrails of how to responsibly utilize something at your company.
Most definitely. And I continue to have to remind myself that it's not intended to replace humans or a human intellectual, and therefore we need to trust but verify.
Yeah, we spoke on this topic with a couple folks, and one of the kind of dialogues that came up was, it's not meant to replace a human, it's a tool. So how do you optimize the use of this tool so that you're getting maximum value out of it, but also de-risking and making sure that you're keeping the model on track, so to speak?
It's an enhancement to everything that we're trying to do, and the way that we're adopting it is under the mindset of how do we enhance what we're doing? How can we work smarter, not harder, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, Alyssa, governance geek, sustainability nerd, I don't even know who you are.
Don't worry, I totally have a cool personal life also.
But to build on your comments, because I think it's a really good one, and this is maybe a little more of a specific question, Shane, within the concerns and kind of the construct of AI and thinking about risk and governance, how do you also not become the department of no? Like, we don't understand it, there's too much risk, we're just going to say no. It feels like now that is a particularly risky outcome that could have real business impacts, but now being driven by risk and internal audit, which might feel like the tail wagging the dog a little. How are you working through that?
Certainly. And so I'm just going to pull this out of the air, and I'm going to call it Shane's 3 C's principle, and it's to communicate, collaborate, and confirm. And,
Love it.
And that is like near and dear. And so it's working with infotech security, it's working with procurement, it's working with business technology to understand what is the wish list, what do we have? Do we have an inventory? Do we know? Are we potentially working against each other in any way, shape, or form? But ultimately, do we have a North Star, and what's that North Star, and how can we stay true to that North Star? But knowing that North Star is going to continue to work around the solar system, so we've got to be on our toes. And so our traditional approaches to coming in after the fact and auditing historical data aren't going to get us where we need to get to. We've got to be collaborative. We've got to be adaptive. We've got to be very proactive in how we work with the business to understand.
Okay, this one might be a curveball, but that actually, I think, begs the question of how much more challenging is it to do that, to be agile, to work in real time as things are evolving and developing versus that kind of retrospective or retroactive audit that's so key to the discipline?
Yeah, so we keep talking about technology innovation, but it's beyond, above and beyond that. It's also skills innovation. And so it takes a different mindset of my audit team, myself, and a culture. And we've had to, build and collaborate with our leaders to get the buy-in, to get the permission, and get invited to those discussions so that we have a seat at the table and we're able to provide insights as well as understand, challenge, and in some cases, move just as quick in our own agile ways to say, okay, we understand that what we're auditing is a black box perhaps, and therefore we don't know exactly what goes on in the middle of that black box, but we can look at the inputs and we can look at the outputs and get comfort in different ways. And that takes a different mindset, a different skill set.
Well, Shane, let's broaden the conversation a little bit beyond AI and governance to the just overall sentiment of uncertainty. A lot of things changing. There's been regulatory changes, macroeconomic changes. As you think about internal audit and risk assessments, what are you doing to stay ahead of that? Because it feels like there's some landmines ahead potentially for organizations, and risk could take such a key role in avoiding them.
Obviously, I'm listening to all your podcasts, Steve. Clearly.
Well, it's Alyssa that makes the podcast. We'll be clear on that.
But it requires, again, a different mindset. The status quo isn't going to get us where we want to get to in the future. And so it's thinking more forwardly in terms of where are we trying to get to and what are the different scenarios in terms of how we might get there. And I think the amount of uncertainty, causes you to continue to revisit those scenarios and rethink those scenarios, and ultimately retooling in some ways in the sense of how we use data, the way we do analytics, how are we prompting and asking for information when using tools like artificial intelligence, and then ultimately how are we going above and beyond in how we document our work so that it's usable the next time around. It's not an audit anymore where you dust it off every 3 years and you look at it. This is something we might be revisiting next month or 6 weeks down the road.
Yeah.
Or we might be sharing it with another department that's embarking down a similar journey, and hopefully they can use it as a use case and not have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. You mentioned agility before, and I don't want to offend anyone in the room or on the chairs or certainly listening in, but I don't know if auditors are always, the first word that comes to mind is agile when you think about this discipline.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. With him sitting right next to you.
It was a cold-blooded show.
I was already sweating.
You got to leave it all on the field, But it really makes me think of this change management piece that must be going on in the discipline right now, because that is a new muscle that needs to really be built in terms of how to work as a team and also work across all the different stakeholders in an organization. And so, tactically speaking, how can you, with all of this uncertainty, with, running around the track, it's like running in 3 dimensions without quite knowing what the North Star is, without quite knowing, where you're going to wind up. How do you build that kind of resilience, without slowing down?
I think it takes a lot of sharing and learning at the same time. And so conferences like Amplify are a great example of, I'm amongst hundreds of my peers and learning from them, understanding their trials and tribulations, where they've been, where they're trying to get to, and comparing and contrasting my own. And it's dependent upon team size, it's dependent upon industry in some cases, different rules and regulations, and then ultimately the culture and the strategy of the organization. And so that's a lot to mold and bake into a recipe for success. And what that takes is consistent re-envisioning, how are we going to achieve our end goal, our strategy. And so we have an internal audit strategy that is focused on growing, innovating, doing more with less, shifting the pendulum from focused on, simply financial risk to more operational and more strategic risk. And in order to do that, we need to take advantage of the data that's available.
Yeah, it almost honestly to me represents like a new opportunity because, volatility is scary. Like there's a lot of risk and uncertainty in that. But the other side of that coin is really the opportunity that brings teams together to figure stuff out rather than sticking to the old rule book or playbook, so to speak, really saying like, okay, we're navigating new waters. We're not entirely sure where this is going. Let's really be thoughtful and collaborative and think about what's going to be best for our business here.
You got it. And so it's a lot of brainstorming, and auditors aren't traditionally known as agile, perhaps, or agility, or, coming up with a lot of creative ideas. But we learn from our lessons learned, and when we share those, we can move much faster. So it's that teamwork.
And to the point that you're all making, I think now is an opportunity to flip the script, as it were, to break away from the stereotype for audit and risk professionals to really be using this. Hey, this is a time when we can actually start to think ahead, when it's perhaps not been any more important that we do so in this current environment. Well, Shane Negangard, Head of Internal Audit, Workiva, thank you so much for the insights. Appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you again to our guests, Matt Kelly and Shane Negangard, and thank you for listening.
This has been The Pre-Read, brought to you by Workiva, the world's only unified platform for financial reporting, sustainability, audit, and risk.
We've got more insights and hot takes coming your way, so be sure to follow or subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your edge.
If you liked the show, leave a review, send it to someone you love, or just shout it out on your next team call.
We'll be back next week. Until then, go lead it like you mean it.
I'm Alyssa Zucker, and that's Steve Soter. Our lead producer is Mike Rabanio, with audio support from Joseph Machinsky and Drew Hayes.
Claire Allison is our graphic designer. Transcripts are created and edited by Courtney Kimsey. And thanks to our digital and social team, Mike Berg, Katie Carr, and Michael Karnowski.